Hello out there, YouTubers, and welcome to PE Slick Podcast. I'm your host, Matt here. Each week I'm going to bring you something different in terms of leadership, ministering, entertainment, book authoring, and much more. But before we begin each time, I'm going to be airing a classic throwback commercial from back in the 80s or 90s or 2000s for my personal liking. Stay tuned.
How can you tell if something's high quality?
Well, you can squeeze it, sniff it, thump it, or bump it, but if you can't pump it, it's not a ballpark Frank.
Ballpark Beef Franks, the high-quality hot dogs that plump when you cook them.
And we're back with PE Slick Podcast. Joining me this week is a good friend of mine. I had the pleasure of going to school with this guy, and I can tell is a very dear fan of One Direction and Busted and many other good groups, but we also got in common One Tree Hill. He's a singer in his own right, and I'm happy to have him on my podcast this week, Mr. Pat Renny. How you doing, man?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing real swell. So let's go to the beginning, man. Where are you from?
I'm from Baltimore. I grew up in Essex all my life, and I'm still here. So after my San Diego trip earlier this summer, I have plans of someday moving West Coast and pursuing music there. So.
Okay. Growing up, what favorite genre of music did you like?
I don't want to sound like a stereotypical 90s kid, but everything growing up together was always like the 90s boy bands, like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, 90 Degrees, Dream Street. So, I grew up with a lot of those boy bands, especially Backstreet Boys. So, basically, those boy bands really kind of made me have a hobby of singing all the time. A lot of kids grew up with hobbies of playing sports or getting into video games and all the other stuff. And that kind of helps them grow into the people that they are. And for me, it's always been music.
Right.
I've always been, wanting to sing, and I've been singing ever since.
I'm curious though, because you have listed a lot of bands that I knew from that time. Dream Street was one of them. Nickelodeon advertised them a lot, and I actually was a fan of that song they made. It happens every time.
Yeah. I love Dream Street. I love Dream Street.
Yeah.
That was the boy band that Jesse McCartney was in. Yeah, I actually saw Jesse McCartney summer of last year. He was performing at the Fillmore in D.C. and
right.
I saw him on stage. Granted, I was one of the only guys in that concert, but whatever. So when I saw him perform, I was like, wow, he's been doing this for so long since Dream Street. I want to do what Jesse McCartney's doing, the way how he's on stage and performing, and all those hardcore dedicated fans are still screaming his name after all those years. I want to experience what Jesse McCartney is experiencing. So.
Yeah, because he has been around for a long time, and I'm not sure if you noticed or not, he even was on television. He was on the soap opera I used to watch called All My Children. He was on there for a big time.
Yeah. He was on the soap opera All My Children, yeah. And he was also on the WB show Summerland. And, yeah, I keep in touch with his acting stuff, too.
Yeah.
So he's definitely a music influence of mine, for sure.
Okay. Well, I guess that kind of falls into my next question I was going to ask you. Do you have a favorite artist or group?
I can name a lot of them, man. Probably, my favorite music group of all time would have to be the British. You just said it earlier, the British band Busted. Mainly because as a high school kid, I was never one of those people that followed, what was in, with music. I just followed music that I just generally liked myself. So, and for Busted not being known in America, it was kind of like having a secret treasure of good music that no one knew about. So
right.
The only time people would know about Busted in high school was when I would kind of argue with the hardcore Jonas Brothers fans, saying that Year 3000 is not their song.
Right.
That was the only time where people actually heard about Busted, was because about me, spreading that whole thing up. Year 3000 is not a Jonas Brothers song and everything like that. that's how hardcore of a Busted fan I was and still am. And I'm glad that they're back together and they're making new music. So, I mean, I would say that, they are my favorite group of all time. So.
Yeah. And one thing I gotta give a shout out to real quick that me and Pat appreciated a lot. It's no longer in business, but we both was a fan of the place in Towson, Records and Tape Traders. They had a lot of CDs and movies. Yeah.
I miss that place. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. They had a lot of stuff there. Let's go to the beginning a bit though. How did you get to the point of becoming a musician?
All right. So, I mean, you're probably going to laugh about this, but, I know you're a movie nerd. Well, it actually started when I was like 10 years old, and there was a movie from 2003 that came out with Jack Black called School of Rock. And I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah.
So basically it was that movie that made me really, really wanted to take music seriously because seeing Jack Black, just put together a rock band from, with a bunch of kids and, seeing all these 10-year-old kids, play at a live show and everything like that. I was like, wow, I'm like the same age as them. I kind of want to do what they're doing,
Right.
So when I was around 12 or 13, I actually got my first guitar. It was like one of those cheap Costco Fender guitars, but, a 12-year-old kid, I didn't know the difference. I didn't know about like brands or anything like that. I just wanted to learn, So
right.
My parents put me in lessons, it was just only like a week training. And then the rest, I just kind of taught myself and just listened to bands like Blink-182, Green Day, Simple Plan, Good Charlotte, Sum 41, Fall Out Boy, basically all those mid-2000s pop punk bands, because, there are the easiest songs to play on the guitar. And that basically just made me branch out and, want to be able to, learn more songs on the guitar. And then eventually I started writing my own songs. I mean, granted, they weren't the best songs, but come on, I was like, I was a young teenager, so.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
And my very first time playing in front of people, growing up, I was never really social. Actually, people had no idea I did music back in middle school. So it was actually our 8th grade school dance. It was kind of like a graduation ceremony for the 8th graders. Well, a few kids who were in band class with me, like they were, learning guitar and all that stuff too. So we basically played a couple covers at that school dance. We played Bowling for Soup, 1985, and we also played Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne.
Right.
And seeing the reaction from the kids, seeing them, saying, can I get your autograph, or like, can we take a picture? That was the very first time I've ever experienced, wow, I want to do this forever. and then when it was summer vacation right after that 8th grade year, my family took me to Nashville, Tennessee, and then I was immediately like, wow. I mean, like, I immediately just got hooked on the music right away.
Nashville is really known for music-wise. They even had a show on ABC a few years ago after itself called Nashville, and that, music really is a big part. And I'm sure once you got in it and fans started recognizing you, it was like, man, I need to keep doing this. This is a dream.
It really was a dream, and I basically like kept up with it in high school. I mean, I wasn't anywhere near where I am now, but I mean, like, then again, like, it was during a time when social media was still new, with the MySpace thing and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I was seeing, it was during that time where the Baltimore local music scene was really, really popular, especially at the Record Theater in Towson, where all these local bands would play. And eventually, when I was 16, 17, I started, doing the same thing, playing at the Record Theater, and I was in a very short-lived pop punk band called Face Day in high school. So, I mean, you want to hear more about Face Day, or?
Yeah, that's fine. That was actually I was going to bring that up. I remember you telling me a few years ago when we first met that you was in the band once.
Oh yeah, before the solo thing, I was in a very short-lived band called Face a Day from 2008 to 2012. I mean, it all started when I was in high school, and a mutual friend of mine, told me about this other kid who was in the same graduating class with me, and then he was just learning drums, and then I got a random message from him saying that he was starting groups. So I was like, you know what? I love all these pop punk bands. I'm not in a band. Why not?
Right.
I was only 16, and I just really wanted to get my, foot out the door. And then there was another guy who, the drummer knew. His name was Jake, and the three of us met in my basement, and we started writing a few songs. We started playing some all-time low covers, and we had the three of us, but we needed one more person to kind of complete that sound. And our guitar player at the time, his ex-girlfriend was a part of this youth group, and we would sometimes attend that youth group. And there was another guy who played guitar, so we asked him, and then the first sound that we made, just the four of us, we knew that there was something there. We knew that we sounded awesome. And then next thing you knew, we were a group, and we started playing all over local venues. We played at the Record Theater in Towson. We played at Audubon. We played at a bunch of other venues that aren't around anymore in Baltimore. But we had the chance of opening up for big bands in Baltimore. We also had a chance of opening for signed bands as well, including Memphis Mayfire. If people don't believe me, I do have the old flyer of us opening for Memphis Mayfire, so just keep that in mind, you guys. Go follow my IG at Pat Renny. So and that was a great few years. It was like awesome. You're a 17-year-old kid, just playing at local venues and watching high school kids scream your name. It was the best feeling ever, and I was loving every second of it.
Right. So, from your time being in the band, I know it was short-lived, but did it ever get to a point where, because your skill with music and writing and what you were doing, did it ever get to a point where it was like most groups do, where it's like, you know what, I just want to go solo and do my own thing?
I had a feeling that the solo question was about to come up. But from 2011 to 2012, things started to change. We weren't happy anymore, and sometimes in rehearsals, people would leave early after 2 songs, and it felt like the songs that I was writing at the time, they weren't down with, and also the sound. It wasn't even just that. We were just not getting along anymore, and
right.
It was that point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
I was 19. I was 19 at the time, and I knew that I wanted to make my own sound and wanted to branch out and do something, because from 2008 to 2012, I was with 3 other guys.
Right.
And I knew that the music that I wanted to make was different. So, and I remember the fight that kind of caused the breakup. And the lesson learned, I do like bands more than solo artists. I'm not going to lie about that. But that particular band just didn't work out. It just taught me that just because they're a musician doesn't mean that they are right for you. You just gotta, try out different musicians and see which chemistry works the best.
Right.
But the real seed of what really made me want to be a solo artist at that time was, the real seed of that was when I wrote this song called Only One. Only One was a song, was based off of a Korean drama called Dream High, that came out in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a scene from the end of the show where the guy leaves the girl that he loves to pursue his music career. And
wow.
And that scene kind of hit me a bit, because, the ending of it just kind of left the the fans going okay, what happens next, kind of a thing. So I kind of wrote a song based off what it would be like to kind of be 10 years away, 10 years apart from, the person that you loved, just to pursue your music career. So I just kind of took that episode and kind of like wrote a song about it.
Right.
So, and during that time when I was in the group, one of the guys, I won't say his name, but one of the guys said to me, "You're not meant to write music for yourself. You're meant to write music for us." And that kind of pushed me further and further into wanting to, do this on my own.
Yeah, that's really messed up there. It's like, it's always, like they say, there's always that one person, that one hater, and it's like once you expand and grow out there, it's like, look at me now, look at what I can do now. I mean, obviously it was meant for you to go solo and do that, because look at where you at now,
Yeah.
I'm curious though, man, when are you going to get that Grammy nomination, man?
Well, this is the thing, man. I think that with music these days, with social media, I think independent is the way to go. I mean, there's a theory from Kevin Kelly. I don't know if you're familiar with that theory. 1,000 True Fans. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've seen some of that through YouTube. I don't know that too well, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, basically his theory of 1,000 True Fans is actually what motivated me to really take music a lot more seriously and to see that, wow, I really can make a living with music and everything like that. So, and you mentioned YouTube. After when Face Day broke up, I made my way into YouTube and, have been doing YouTube from 2011 up to 2018, since last year, yeah. I took a break from YouTube for personal reasons, and I took a break in general. But I'm finally back and ready to put out new music.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, YouTube has been a great way of me putting music out there, and a great way for me to grow fans and everything like that.
Right.
And if it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't have that confidence to do things independently. So, and yeah, so I was doing YouTube. And then I was, and that was right after Face Day broke up. I was ready to stand alone. And it really was a struggle because 2014, I auditioned for America's Got Talent, and I didn't get in. So that was kind of it kind of made me feel very discouraged, and made me feel like a has-been, because the solo thing hasn't been the easiest road. I'm not going to lie to you about that.
Right.
After Face Day broke up, I had to prove to a lot of people that I could, be a solo artist, because every time I have a show, I wouldn't sell tickets the way how I used to when I was in the group. And it wasn't even just that. I had no connections to any studios. I had no connections to basically the connections I had back then, so I had to start everything from scratch all over again. This wasn't oh yeah, I was a former lead singer of a pop punk band, but I still got it. No, it was, I lost all my connections, and I had to start all over again.
It does take a lot to get from point A to B. It doesn't happen overnight. A lot of people, I would think it can happen overnight. But, with time and effort, things do pan out. And like I said, you've come a long way, and you're still growing and learning as you go. And I know down the line, you're gonna be out there with Jesse McCarthy, and y'all gonna be hustling for a Grammy win. And I know you're gonna go places, man. I got faith with you. With what you're
Thank
doing.
you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. What advice has anybody ever given you as far as going into this medium?
The advice that people have given me mainly was just to stay humble, stay driven, and know that, not everyone is going to like your music. So that was basically mentally prepare myself. That was the advice that I was just giving. It's just be mentally prepared, because when I was doing YouTube, I had the first experience of getting trolled on YouTube, and that wasn't the best feeling ever. I actually wanted to quit music because of my first ever experience of being cyberbullied from YouTube trolls. They are the worst.
Yeah.
They're the worst.
Yeah.
And that was another factor into things that wasn't going right as a solo artist, and everything like that was I really felt discouraged. I wasn't getting the views I wanted on YouTube. I didn't get in America's Got Talent. I had no studio. So I remember being on the phone with a family friend saying, like, I gave up music. I remember this. I was like 20, 21, I think, and I just like remembered feeling very discouraged because I felt like there was no hope for me making music. And again, I had nothing. So
Right.
I had nothing.
You know, the thing about, you know, from your journeys, you released 3 albums, correct?
This is going to be, I released 2 solo EPs, and this is about to be my 3rd one. Technically 4th, because I do remember us talking about, no, my first ever EP, it never released. It got shelved.
Uh,
That's another story that,
yeah.
That's another story. Someone I went to college with who had a friend who had a studio, and I was pretty desperate. Again, I had no one, Matt. I had no one. I had to start all over again. I was pretty desperate.
Right.
Felt like I was being bullied more than anything with that producer. Like, it was just like tearing down all my, ideas, and I just felt like I couldn't be myself. I'm not going to put his name out there because I am not that petty of a person, but it felt like it was more about money than anything else.
Right.
And when he said that he can't even, he wanted more money just to get that, EP done. When he told me in the beginning he's only charging a certain price, it was just like, okay, well, you are basically bringing me down, but you want more money, and I can't even put my full confidence into my performance just because I'm feeling discouraged. So I was pretty overwhelmed during that time, and because of feeling like screwed over, and because of like everything, like having low self-esteem and everything like that, basically the first EP that I recorded in 2014, it was done, but it never got released.
Right.
So that was basically shelved after that. And that was another low point that I was facing. Again, like another low point. I was just like, okay, I'm not in a band anymore. I don't have a studio. My first ever solo EP that I wrote, good songs about is gone too. So what do I do now? What do I do now?
Right.
And it wasn't until the next year, my current producer that I work with now, messaged me on Facebook. And he messaged me on Facebook, and I already knew who he was because I used to see his old band that he was in. I used to watch them all the time at the record theater, so I already knew who he was. And then he said to me that he just made a studio in Overley, which is only 10 minutes away from my house, and he said, that if, he's heard my stuff and, he took an interest in wanting to record my first EP, so.
Right.
And when I first heard, when I first came to the studio and started working with him, we clicked right away. Like we really got along. It was just like, wow, like this guy shares the same image that I have for my music. And the song "Only One" that I told you about, when I was on the band place today, like,
yes,
that was the first time like that song came to life.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, this sounds so good. Like, this was the first experience where I was like, wow, a professional studio that I haven't recorded in since 2010 with my old band. Suddenly I have that first taste of, wow, okay, this is what it's like to be a solo artist. This is what it's like to actually put out my first solo EP. And that's when I released my first ever EP, Except the Fact, in 2016. And it was like probably my proudest accomplishment that year, next to graduating CCBC. But
yeah,
2016 was definitely a very successful year to me. I graduated CCBC. I was doing another music project while I released my first ever solo EP. And
right.
Except the Fact, I do remember the date, September 13th, which is also the same date as one of my best friend's birthdays, but that's not the point. I'll always remember September 13th as the day that I released my very first EP all over the world. So
yeah, man, and I'm sure once that feeling came over. You know, it was like, wow, you know, I finally did it, and it's all over the world, and now, you know, I'm gold, baby.
Granted, it didn't sell the way I wanted it to, but at the same time, it was still a really good accomplishment to know
Yeah.
that this is the first time, streamed and everything. And that was a good run. So the next year after that, I started taking an interest in music videos. So
Right.
the year after that, I haven't worked on original music, and I was just doing YouTube covers. Again, well, not just like any other YouTube covers. Like, basically, like I've always been into like YouTubers like Voice Avenue, Anthem Lights, and seeing them do professional YouTube covers. I wanted to have that experience too, and I was like, you know what? I have connections to videographers now. I still record in the same studio. Why not do it? So after that, I was doing that for a while. But then late 2017, I felt like I was ready to make new music again. So I recorded a song that was written about someone that I had really strong feelings for 4 years ago. She was a Towson girl, and it was basically a story about how she left me and how she said that, it meant nothing to her. And that was basically the first song that inspired my second EP, Aberration.
Right. It.
You know her, but
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
we're not gonna say her name, but
Yeah. It seems like, it's interesting that, hearing you talk. I mean, of course, we know each other. We went to school together, and a lot of what was going on, I was with you through most of it a little bit. It seems like, you experienced some lows, and out of the lows led to your music dropping.
Exactly.
Yeah. And those lows became the high ups. And which brings into my next category question: what is Pat Renny's plans for 2020? And we'll just be going to next year. That kind of means we're saying goodbye to the 2010 decade, and we're going to a new decade. But what is your plan for next year?
I'm glad that you asked that question. So we were talking about lows and everything like that. And have you heard Aberration?
No, that's a little new here for me. Aberration.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Aberration came out spring of last year, and the reason why it was called Aberration was because I wanted to make an EP that was a reflection of like something that was different, a departure from what I was known for, because I already did the whole pop punk band thing. I already did that, and then my first EP, Except the Fact, was more pop rock. So I wanted to do something that was a bit more different, and I wanted something that was like a little bit like shocking. So when I came out with Aberration, it was a bit more rhythmic and it was a bit more R&B sounding, and it was just like something that shocked a lot of people. So, and I thought that Aberration was my proudest music to date. I thought my second EP was, but then now this ties into the next question about 2020 and my plans for 2020. My main goal for 2020 is my latest EP, my third studio EP, Simple Clarity. And I thought Aberration was my proudest music to date, but I was wrong. I think this is my proudest music to date, Simple Clarity.
Right.
So that's my main focus now is Simple Clarity. That's all I care about right now.
I gotta tell you, man, if you were to make an album, though, 'cause like I said, a lot of your albums touch points in your life that were kind of low, and you've gotten high up, since then, and now you're ready to do your third album. I gotta tell you, man, you should do an album where you talk about how you got from point A to point B, and then for a bonus, do a song that talks about every favorite thing that you loved in each group.
And you're going to have to listen to Simple Clarity to know the answer to that. But, yeah, I mean, like, what you can expect for Simple Clarity, I mean, there is a snippet of it on Instagram, but basically you can expect something a bit more electronic, a bit more Z143 sounding, a bit more mature, a bit more direct messages compared to the previous songs. I mean, it's definitely more direct about what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's very personal, and it's definitely my proudest work to date. So, I mean, I'm very looking forward to releasing Simple Clarity.
Well, guys, you hear that, right? Go out there and get this man's album when it come out, man, and listen to it. Download. Well, I'm saying buy the album now. That times have changed. People can just download now. Where me and you are old enough, we can say, back in the day,
Yeah.
things have changed. One thing I was going to ask you, in case, I'm sure you get asked this quite often, but out of curiosity, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to come into this medium?
Wow, I mean, I do get that question a lot, but I mean, like, I think coming into 2020, the best advice that I would give would be to write music. That would be the one thing that I would, say, is because, like, any artist who wants to be original is, like, it's very hard to be original when all you do is just covers. I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong. Doing covers is a great way to grow a fan base, but you want the real true way of, like, being who you are is, like, having a true connection with your fans. And, they're never going to know who you truly are unless you write it.
Right.
So that'll be the best advice I would give to anyone who wants to do music is, write your own music. Be a writer. Show who you are. And actually, that's what inspired Simple Clarity. My third solo EP was like, I didn't ask for inspiration. I didn't think I was going to make another one. It basically just wrote itself.
Right.
I was going through some things this year, and then all of a sudden the songs wrote itself. So that's the best advice I would give to anyone is to write your own music.
Real quick, before I ask my last question, I gotta give another shout out because I remember, I mentioned on this podcast that I make movies. I haven't done nothing in a while because a lot of things has happened over these recent few months and years. But you were in one of my short film projects where you played a detective.
Oh yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, it was one scene, but you
I'm a totally different person now. Continue.
It was fun doing that with you and Deborah Davis. Y'all played that scene, and her character. You went to arrest her. That was a dope scene.
I remember calling her a fraud and saying, I kind of want to watch it now. I wish I still had it. I kind of want to watch it now.
Well, the short film is on YouTube because the version that I originally put out was short, and the one I got now is longer with a lot of deleted scenes that I cut out. And your scene comes like towards the end of the movie, so it is on my YouTube channel, Parish Films, Shaking Ground, and it was from 2015, my third short film. So you are in that, and guys. You guys gotta go out and listen to Pat's music. This man will blow you away. I've been with him when he sung. He is a ladies' man. I've been with him. I can verify that.
I mean, except the fact and Aberration. I mean, they both were, they both were fun things to do. Like, they both helped me out with music, but I mean, Simple Clarity is definitely my proudest work to date. And I'm not just saying that because it's my latest music, but I mean, like, something about Simple Clarity that, really, really stands out compared to the first two EPs. You guys are going to expect something more mature, something a bit more modern, and something that's a bit more of showing who I am as a person.
Right. Yeah, well, hey, you heard it from the man himself, Pat Renny. Hey, go out there when his album come out. Go to Walmart, run that crazy long Walmart. Go to malls, anywhere you can go. Buy it, download it. In case for people who don't know, Pat, I mean, of course I know, but for people who may not know, can you tell us like people where they can find your work? You said Facebook and Instagram too, right?
I'm all over all social medias. Just search Pat Renny on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I currently run another YouTube music channel called Dreaming is Endless. That's basically like my professional YouTube cover work. So, I mean, basically, if anyone who wants to see like my professional studio covers, you could check out Dreaming is Endless. I'm also currently in the making of scouting for musicians for that channel. I had to take a break from it, but I mean, that door is still open. So anyone who wants to be a part of the Dreaming is Endless project, contact me on all my social medias. But yeah, I mean, thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, no problem, man. Hey, thank you for coming out and being a part of this. And
For sure.
And guys, make sure that y'all check out my podcast, PE Slick Podcast Entertainment. Each week I'm gonna bring you a different guest from each genre, rather singing, acting, leadership, ministering. You're gonna get it. Pat, thanks for coming out, man. And
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope down the line you can come back and talk more about your work and your latest album of that day if you're able to come back.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. You give me a call, and then we'll talk nothing about Simple Clarity once it comes out, all right?
I sure will, man. Well, let's take a break with a commercial break, and we'll be back after this. Thank you, guys.
Butterball turkey cold cuts. Any way you slice it, they're delicious. Butterball ham, Butterball bologna, or Butterball smoked turkey breast. They're up to 98% fat-free and all Butterball. So any way you slice it, it's
delicious.
Well, YouTubers, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for tuning in this week for PE Slick Podcast. I'm your host, Ranger Matt, signing off with this wonderful video done by my buddy Pat Renny. Only one. Until next time, you have a good night now.
It's been years since we said goodbye. Looking back in the morning, it had to be like this. But still you cross my mind. Many faces pass me by. The only one to see is you. I know you want me to stay. I know you better than everyone else. The only one that's on my mind, the one I want by my side. It's you, it's you, it's you. The one I'm never letting go. The only one I wanna hold. It's you, it's you, it's you. Shine like a shooting star, so bright and up so far. Is what you wanted to see. The road ahead was the loneliest and possibly the hardest. 'Cause I'm in